Dunkin Donuts got hacked? Not necessarily. 500 million customers are affected in a huge data breach, and thousands of routers are infected with an NSA exploit. All that coming up now on ThreatWire. Greetings, I am Shannon Morris and this is ThreatWire for December 4th, 2018, your summary of the threats to our security, privacy, and internet freedom. As you can tell, I am wearing a hat. That's because it's freezing cold in my studio today. So this week I would like to give a special shout out to all of our new Patreon supporters because you helped the show get to my goal to cover the costs associated with the big upgrades that we did to the studio this year and to start doing a live video Q&A just for all patrons. So since we hit that goal by the end of December, then that Q&A will start up this month, and because of the overwhelming support that I saw for the surprise gift that I did last month, I am going to do another physical reward next year as well. So thank you so much. Y'all are amazing. You keep this show going. Thank you, you're awesome. Now on to the news. Dunkin' Brands Inc., those are the owners of the company called Dunkin Donuts. They posted a notice on their website on November 29th explaining that they were notified of a security breach. Now to be clear, this breach does not affect Dunkin Donuts or their internal servers. It was a credential stuffing attack on the DD Perks loyalty rewards program where attackers used usernames and passwords stolen from other breaches or leaks and stuffed these credentials into the DD Perks login to potentially gain access to accounts. Now, the accessible information included first and last names, email addresses and usernames, and 16-digit DD Perks account numbers or QR codes. Dunkin Donuts said they learned about this attack on October 31st from a third-party security vendor that they use. The vendor stopped most of the attempts, but some may have gained access. They launched an investigation and they are currently working with the security vendor to remediate the issue. And they are replacing old card numbers with new ones, and they have reported the information to law enforcement. So how much does a DD Perks account for go on the dark web? Well, it's pretty cheap. According to Motherboard, they are sold for around 60% less than their value, so an account with $30 worth of credit would go for $12, for example. Now, users are advised to change their password, of course, and use different passwords on every single site if you are not currently doing that already. It's been a while since we had a really massive data breach like this one. Marriott International, the world's largest hotel chain, disclosed on November 30th that its subsidiaries, Starwood Hotels, had a database that was compromised and potentially affected 500 million guests. Marriott International Starwood brands include W, St. Regis, Sheraton, Westin, Le Méridien, Four Points, Element, Aloft, Tribute, and the Luxury Collection, all of which are affected as they use the same reservation system. There has been a bit of confusion, though, about who is affected. This affects Starwood hotel brands, not Marriott properties. Since they are the company that acquired Starwood, they don't use the same database. With that said, this is one of the very largest known security breaches in history. In a News Center bulletin posted by the company, they stated that they determined the incident was caused by unauthorized access to the database on November 19th. The database contained information on guests who stayed at Starwood properties on or before September 10, 2018, which was 2 days after they actually learned of the breach. They soon realized, with the help of security vendors, that this had been occurring since 2014 on the Starwood network. That means that this has been happening for 4 years without being noticed. 4 years. The attacker copied and they encrypted information from the database, and they tried to also remove it. Marriott decrypted the information copied, and they discovered the content soon after. It all came from the guest reservation database, including names, mailing addresses, phone numbers, email addresses, even worse, passport numbers. They also had Starwood preferred guest account information, date of birth, gender, arrival, and departure info, reservation dates, and communication preferences. Whew, that's a lot of information. Also included were payment card numbers and expiration dates encrypted with AES 128. Now, Marriott did not try to inflate the security of AES 128 by also stating that 2 components are needed to decrypt those payment card numbers, and it's entirely possible that that info was also stolen as well. They currently estimate 327 million had all of that information in the database stolen, while the rest of the 500 million had limited information such as names and mailing addresses. Marriott did notify authorities, and they are supporting local law enforcement in an investigation. They created a website which is called info.starwoodhotels.com for anyone who has more questions. They've also offered a free 1 year of Web Watcher to alert users of personal information if found on the web. The company will be emailing affected guests if their email address was found in the database. Now, this means that an attacker does have access to all of that data, including traveling habits, frequency of travel, passport numbers, which might have much larger national security ramifications. Marriott's story is not over, though, because they could face harsh penalties due to GDPR. They could expect fines of 4% of their global revenue or a fine of $20 million, whichever is higher. New York's Attorney General's office also stated that they will open an investigation into the breach, and senators acted very swiftly to call on Congress for federal legislation almost right after the Starwood breach was announced. Now, it's entirely unsure how much Marriott International will owe for the breach, since they are likely to be penalized outside of GDPR, but estimates from IBM and Ponemon put the price at $3.5 billion, which will likely be covered, to a point, by Marriott's cybersecurity liability insurance. And this is not the first problem that they've faced. It even gets worse. They were also the target of malware attacks in 2015 and 2016. Since Marriott acquired Starwood, they will now be looking at the price that they have to pay for the breach. Due diligence is key with online security, and proactively protecting your clientele is a worthy investment. Waiting until after a breach now comes with much larger penalties given GDPR. Consumers will also likely see more phishing since so much data was stolen. The top story chosen by Patreons today has to do with the NSA, kind of. Akamai, which is a content delivery network, wrote on November 28 that thousands of routers are running vulnerable versions of UPnP, and worse, many of those have already been compromised already in a UPnP NAT injection campaign. According to Akamai, 277,000 routers out of a pool of 3.5 million run the vulnerable UPnP implementation. Out of those, 45,000 are compromised already. This can allow an attacker to see devices that are behind the router, and it targets service ports used by SMB. Akamai determined that this campaign is used to open up networks to Eternal Blue and Eternal Red, which was developed by the NSA and later leaked on the web. Eternal Blue attacks Microsoft's implementation of the SMB protocol, since version 1 of SMB mishandles packets from remote attackers. It was released back in April of 2017 by shadow brokers, and it was later used in WannaCry ransomware. The exploit opens up ports 139 and 445 on connected devices, which makes them discoverable on the open web. While the affected routers are in the thousands, this also means that upwards of 2 million connected devices like laptops, PCs, phones, and IoT devices would be opened up for attack. Akamai is not sure what happens once those devices are exposed to an attack, but they do have a general theory based on the ports. Now, this comes around half a year after Akamai reported on how UPnP, which is Universal Plug and Play, was being used by attackers to conceal traffic, and they called this UPN proxy. They worried that this could be used in spam or phishing campaigns or click fraud or DDoS campaigns as well. Users on home networks could see degraded service, malware, ransomware, and fraud, while business networks could see a greater chance of data being compromised. Now, this new attack adds to the growing number of vulnerable devices since that April report, and it affects both Windows and Linux platforms. It works by injecting commands into a vulnerable router with UPnP not properly configured, and these commands force the ports to open, at which time further attacks like Eternal Blue and Red would be possible. The new attack is dubbed Eternal Silence, which is definitely a play on the NSA names. Routers now have patches and updates available to keep them from getting infected by Eternal Blue or Red, but of course, many have just not been updated. For users and network admins, your best bet for protection is to update the firmware on your router or buy a new one if the updates aren't available. And if it was exploited, reboot devices that were connected to it or reset them to factory default. Now, if UPnP is an option, please disable it as well. Thank you so much to everyone again for helping us reach that goal on Patreon to do that monthly live Q&A just for all patrons. And if you are interested in getting access to that along with a slew of other extras, even if it's just $1 or $2 a month, hit that button to become a Patreon supporter because it all helps and it shows me that you appreciate the work that I'm putting in for the show. And also a big thanks to our Hush Puppy perk level patrons for sending in their adorable fur babies. I love them. They're so cute. Keep them coming. We got new ones this week. Ta-da! Hit that subscribe button or share this episode on your favorite social media page as well. And with that, I am Shannon Morris, and I will see you on the internet.